This tutorial covers chapter 5.2 of the book Spring Boot Quick Start. More specifically, we will be explaining how to use a JSON serialize annotation to define custom serializer. That means that we want to define how our person DTO should be converted into a JSON string. To do so, first we need to create Java class that will be used as our custom serializer. And in this case, this is this class person DTO serializer. This class needs to extend JSON serializer and it needs to override its method serialize. Then, as a first parameter into this method, it will receive the DTO that needs to be serialized into a JSON string. Inside the overridden serialize method, we can then define different JSON properties and the values with which those properties need to be populated. So in this case shows how a custom serializer can then be used to specify JSON properties which will have different names than the DTO properties. And this is our person and this is our DTO class. So in order to specify that we want to use a custom serializer, then we need to use this annotation, JSON serialize annotation, which is the subject of this video. Using this annotation, we can specify which Java class needs to be used as a custom serializer, and in our case, this is the class that has been explained here. Our controller looks the same as it did in all of our previous examples. It needs to be annotated with REST controller annotation, and endpoint needs to return a DTO. Then inside the endpoint, we can create an instance of person DTO and then return this instance from the endpoint. At that point, Spring Framework will use our custom serializer to serialize DTO properties into a JSON string by using this overridden serialize method, which specifies which names should be used for JSON properties and then which values should be stored in those JSON properties. So here we are simply storing DTO properties, but if needed, we can add here an additional custom logic that doesn't simply store DTO properties into JSON properties, but maybe does some additional transformations and calculations. Our application can be tested by using a Chrome browser and by simply calling this endpoint's URL, and then the endpoint will return following JSON string as defined by our custom serializer.